Thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to talk about this topic because it's near and dear to my heart. It's one of the reasons why I'm not getting better, I think, is the mold. And I didn't realize how important of a piece it was until recently. So I'm glad that you can kind of give us the one-on-one on mold today. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Let's do it.
I read that you're second generation, a mold specialist. So how did your father, I assume, got into this?
So it's my father-in-law. I'm claiming second generation, but it's because he is like a father and he's taught me how to do this. So it's definitely family business. The quick version of the story is, I don't know, about 9, 10 years ago, however long it was. I didn't know anything about mold. I was fine. I lived in an apartment, pipe leak in the ceiling from an apartment above me, floods in my room. I end up not feeling right. I end up getting sick. I get like skin issues. I get cognitive issues. Landlord sends some mold inspector out. That's like most of them that exist out there. And he's like, hey, everything's fine. There's no problems here. And then Mark comes out, who's my father-in-law, Mark Levy. And he's literally like one of the best that there is in the world at this. And he comes out and he spends like 2 hours in my 800 square foot apartment where the other guy was there for like 20 minutes, right. Finds 8 problems, some of them tied to the leak, some of them not tied to the leak. And basically just opened my eyes to like what was going on. And at the time I was kind of on this like, I don't know, quarter life crisis, sort of trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life thing and have an impact on the world and all that stuff. And I saw like what he did for me and I was like, whoa, man, I need to get into this. Like, this is how you can actually like make an impact on people's lives, help people. And so on the spot, I was like, hey, I want to work with you. I'd been dating his daughter for like a couple months. Like I just went all in on the relationship basically.
That's funny.
Yeah.
You better hope it worked out.
I knew early on, I think, so I wasn't too stressed out about doing that.
That's so funny, but it's true. I really think, what you just mentioned, a lot of the symptoms from mold mimics the symptoms or very similar to the symptoms for people with Lyme. So then that's where I'm like, wait, of the symptoms I'm having Lyme symptoms, or are they from the mold? And I think there's a lot of cross section for that.
Yeah. I mean, full disclosure, I'm not a doctor, right?
Yeah.
I'll probably make comments a lot, but I'm not a doctor. But, I know a lot of them. I talked to a lot of them. I actually just did an episode on my show with Dr. Darren Ingalls, which was an amazing, amazing Lyme episode. I learned so much from him. But it was just like Lyme and mold are so connected. And it's almost like some people think that you have to do it a certain way or one came before the other or this or that. The reality is it's just they both, for whatever reason, they kind of make the other one bring the worst out of the other one if you want to. It's like a terrible relationship.
No, I agree.
So you have to handle both sides of the relationship, right?
Right. No. And so people who reach out to me, I'm always like, if you're not getting better, and anybody who's listening, like if you're not getting better from typical Lyme treatments, I would say like stop what you're doing right now and check to make sure you have mold. And how would you suggest that they do? Is that to go to the doctor and see if it's in their body, or is it check their house, or what comes first, the chicken or the egg, like with the body or the house?
It could honestly be either way. I've worked with people who've done it both. Either way leads you to the same point. So I don't think it matters too much. I have some people that their doctor suspected it first. And so they did some labs and some things that kind of validated it. I've had other people where they ended up like doing an ERMI test in their house first because maybe they read something about the connection, or maybe their doctor sort of half-heartedly brought it up but didn't really do clinical testing. And then an ERMI test in their house, which is just a dust collection from throughout the house. It's really easy to do, but it's a really, really good screening test just to kind of see what's there. And
where do you get that, online, or do you through you? Where do you get that?
Yeah, you can get them online. There's a couple labs that do it. One is EnviroBiomics. Another one is Mycometrics. Both of those labs do them. It's like a Swiffer pad, and you just wipe. It's like you just clean your house, basically. So what happens is that the mold fragments, they move through the house and they settle down on surfaces throughout the home, and they settle in dust reservoirs. And then as we move through the house, these dust reservoirs are continuously popped up in our breathing zone. It's something that's called the human cloud effect. So like if you ever watched Charlie Brown when you were a kid, there was like the kid that was like super dirty all the time. Like this cloud of dirt around him. That is basically happening to us as we move through our own homes all the time, except instead of dirt is little microscopic particles that we don't see. And so the beauty of doing a dust collection test for this stuff is that it's a much more sensitized test. So you're actually getting better information out of it, but it's also showing you more historic perspective of what's gone on. Most inspectors come in and they do like an air sample in the middle of your room. What that's doing, you're getting a snapshot in time of 5 minutes, and you're not really getting the most in-depth type of analysis. And it's actually Air samples used in that way are the weakest. It's the weakness of an air sample just doing it like that. Yet our entire industry does it like that. So what's happening is you're taking a sample method that's really not meant to be used that way, yet everyone is doing it. And so we get all these false negatives all the time because everybody thinks there's no problems. The ERMI is great because it gives you a historic point of view of what's gone on. That's showing you what's popping up in your breathing zone. So it's also giving you a better idea of your exposure as you're moving through your house. And it's super easy to collect, right? So we could do that on our own as a quick little screening test.
That's great. And so besides that, you can also probably see some of the mold, right? If you see mold or black mold in the corner of your bathroom or something like that, that's probably a good telltale sign that you have mold.
Well, yeah, but it's funny. Most mold is hidden. I say this almost like a joke, but it's true. I'm like, hey guys, you want to know the secret to finding, hidden mold in your house? Like, yeah, what is it? I'm like, don't look for mold. Like that's the secret.
True. No, it's true. Or, I find too, as a Lyme person, I get super sensitive smell. Mm-hmm. So like, for example, in my situation in my house, I wasn't getting better. And the doctor's like, you have mold. And I'm like, no, I can't have mold. Like we already had it fixed. And she's like, no, you still have it somewhere. And I actually could smell it, like somewhat smell it. And I was like, you know what? There's something not right. And my husband's like, I don't smell it. But I think because people who have Lyme are super sensitive with smell, you can almost smell a different smell. And that's when my mold was actually our radiator underneath our floorboards broke somehow or something happened. And it caused all underneath our hardwood floors to get black mold. And we didn't see it. So that was one case. So say if like it comes back, your Swifter thing comes back, whatever you call it. What was it called again?
It's ERMI.
Okay. So the ERMI test comes back negative. It doesn't necessarily mean you don't have mold, right?
Right. Most times they don't come back negative.
They don't. Okay.
Yeah. Most times there's problems there. It's almost tough because I could talk to someone and just kind of know if there's a problem in their house without even running that.
Oh, wow.
But sometimes people just need some proof that there's something going on to validate what's happening. My initial conversation with clients, and there's still benefit in running that test later on, right? I would still want to run it regardless. So that's why it doesn't really matter that much. But like at the beginning, if I ask them about the history of what's gone on in their home, and I ask them about, hey, has there been any, water leaks that you know of? How old is your house? How old's your air conditioning system? Just little things about the house. I could already kind of figure out, even without going in there, where some of the problems are going to be just from a conversation.
So once either it comes back positive or their blood work comes back positive, they would call you. What next steps do you do once you're there?
Yeah. So the goal is really, we have two goals when we go in. It's not just to, like I said, you could do an ERMI on your own and that says, great, you got a mold problem. Now what? Right. And a lot of inspectors out there, that's all that they'll do. They'll come out.
I had someone do the air test. They're like, you have mold. I'm like, okay, what next? And they're like, oh no, I don't know. That's not our department. I was like, what? Then why did I hire you?
It's insane. It's insane. And it's just this massive problem in our industry. Even if you get inspectors that will use that type of test, and again, I keep bringing it up, it's definitely not the end all be all of how to find problems in your house, but it's a good screening test to see what's going on. But even if you have people that will use that test, they don't actually find where it's coming from. So when I talk to clients at the beginning, I say, listen, we got two goals. Okay. The first goal is we got to figure out where the source of the problem is. I use this analogy all the time that mold is like a factory. And so if you ever drive by a factory, they make whatever they're making inside. Smoke comes out of the top of the factory. The smoke is what creates the air pollution that we then breathe, right? So while the factory is not directly getting to our face and our nose, right? It's creating smoke that is then getting to us. The factory is ultimately what's causing the smoke. So if we went and we said, we're going to clean up all of our air pollution, all we're going to do is just try to clean the air and do nothing else. Well, you're fighting this never-ending battle because there's still factories that keep pumping smoke in the air. It's never going to get fixed. That's the same as going into someone's house, doing an ERMI test, say it's bad. So we're just going to come in and we're going to fog your house and clean it and everything's going to be fine. You know what? 2 weeks later, a month later, the mold problem is going to be exactly the same as it was when you did it that time. You have to find where it's coming from. And so that's really the bulk of kind of the next step is if you did do an ERMI and you find there's something up in your house, right? It's off. It doesn't make sense. We have to go in and do a deep dive and figure out where it's hiding. And that process can take anywhere from like 4 to 8 hours, depending on the size of the house. And
then how do you do that? Is it another special kind of test or is that through sight or?
Yeah. So it's not about like tests that are the magic test, right? Like it's almost like if you're a doctor and you're running a series of tests on someone's body, There are certain tests that are really good for a certain thing. And there are certain tests that are also good for a certain other thing. If you use them to achieve the opposite, they would both be terrible at doing what the other one is good at, right? So like you almost kind of view a sampling plan like you're putting a puzzle together. You're like, okay, so this is really good for this. So I'm going to use this type of test here. And then this test is really good for this. So we're going to use this here. But it's not only about the testing. You have to know where to collect the test. That's the big thing. You know, you could go in all day and know how to collect an air sample, but if you don't know where to do it from, then it doesn't mean anything. And so a big chunk of it is a visual. Really, that time that we're going through the house, it's looking at everything. It's looking for, like I said before, it's not looking for mold. Like if we find it, that's great. But it's looking for signs of water damage. That is the big secret. If everyone takes anything out of this, think of any time that you've had any sort of minor little water leak under a sink somewhere that you thought that wasn't a big deal. It's a big deal, right? Because those are the areas that mold grows. Some of the things are more obvious that when I talk to a client up front, they know that they had a leak under their sink. They just dismissed it because they didn't think it was a problem. Other times we're going through the home and we're finding areas with visible water damage, and not like massive water damage, like little things, little cracking in paint, a little baseboard pulling off the wall a little bit, little subtle things. But those are telling us that there's been a water issue that's occurred here. That's where we test. So we try to find the source of where it is. So it's really a heavy visual. And then we do rely on other tools and equipment, but the visual is so important.
So what happens if you do have like a minor leak under your sink? Is there something that you could do to prevent that mold from starting? Like, is there any recommendations you would say right now for anybody who does have like a minor leak and just be like, okay, this is what you need to do to prevent mold growing?
Well, if the leak happened already, you're probably too late. Mold only needs 24, 48 hours to grow. So if you had a sink leak, and it was, even if it's not a big leak, it could be a drip. It could be something that was, over time. We're not talking massive floods that come out of your cabinet, right? We're talking little drips from faucets or pipes or things like that. It doesn't need that long to grow. Most of us don't ever look under our sinks. So we're kind of past that 2-day timeline for the most part. And mold can grow as a result of it. 2 townhouses ago that I lived in, I had a kitchen sink and I looked under it. No mold visible. Nothing like super crazy. There was one little drip mark at the back. If for people that are listening, it was about the size of like maybe a penny or a nickel. And I saw a drip mark on the floor where you put your products and stuff all the way towards the back. That's all that I saw. I tested it because it's what I do. And it came back and there was a big mold problem under there. And then when they came in and did remediation, they took the cabinet off. And I was in there all suited up. I wanted to see what it looked like. It was like a case study for me to kind of see what it looked like afterwards. And I go, the entire bottom side of my cabinet was covered in mold. The top side, one drip mark that was the size of like
So the water went through the wood and made everything underneath moldy. Oh my gosh.
And so the way that we tested that, like if you looked in there by yourself, like, oh, there was a drip here, whatever, sink's drip, not a big deal. What we did is we put an air sampling pump inside of the cabinet and then we shut the cabinet doors. So we actually use an air test right at where we think the source is. And it came back and it was elevated. It showed that there was something happening. And then they pulled the sink off and sure enough, there's a big mold problem under my sink.
So the moral of the story, if you see any little thing at this point, it's too late for you to do anything about it. You got to call like you guys or.
Yeah, you got to check it. You got to see what's going on, right? Think of it this way. Like if you found a mole on your body, you get it checked. Right? Like, oh man, this thing wasn't here before. I don't know how long it's been here, but this shouldn't be here, right? Like, we know you're supposed to check those things out. You go get it checked. These little inconsistencies in the building material in our houses, they're like little moles that pop up on your body. You got to get them checked. It might not be anything. And if it's not, that's great, but it could be something. And so that's why you check them, right? So it doesn't turn into something bigger.
I love your analogies. It makes me, visualize it and it's easier. So you have, you're like a total entrepreneur because you have lots of different things going on. You have your mold finder company, which comes to your house. You're national, right?
Yeah. So that company is actually called We Inspect.
Oh, that's the We Inspect one.
And that's the name of our company that travels around. Yeah.
Right. So that's the company that comes to your house, but then you do have moldfinders.com or that's the class.
Yeah. So we also created something called Mold Finders Method, which is a way to basically teach people how to go through their own homes, right? So like I just explained to you how to look under a sink and how to find a problem. That's one easy thing you can do. I know how to do this in a house everywhere. And so what was happening is before we became even a national traveling company, we got all these calls from everywhere where people were trying to figure it out. and we just couldn't even support them at the time. But I had this one client who I had worked with a lot locally in California, and she was moving to Hawaii. She's like, Brian, I need you to come out and look at this house in Hawaii I'm looking to buy. I need you to make sure there's nothing here, because I had worked in her house in LA. And I was like, as much as I want to go to Hawaii, my wife is pregnant. She'll never like let me live it down. I can't come to Hawaii, right? And so she kept like badgering me, and not like in a mean way. She's like, I literally don't trust anyone else to come do this. I will fly you out there. You can stay there for a week. I'll put you up. I don't care. Turn in a vacation. I need you to come do this. And so I was like, how can I help her? How can we do this? So I asked her, I was like, okay, I literally can't come. I appreciate it. I literally cannot come. It's nothing personal. So tell me a little about the house. I had her tell me how many rooms there were, the different types of rooms, things like that. And I literally just like hand wrote, okay, in this room, I want you to look like here, 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 and here. And in this room, I want you to look here, here, here. And I kind of wrote just literally like a list on a piece of paper. And then I sent her pictures of what water damage looks like. Okay. Keep in mind, I've already been through like two of her houses I had been through already. She had seen the process multiple times, but it hadn't clicked yet because she wasn't looking. So I sent her, there's really just 5 signs of water damage. It's not crazy, guys. It's not hard to do. So like, basically I showed her what to look for in these 5 different pictures of different types of water damage. And then in all of her rooms, I basically just wrote out, okay, here's where you look in this bedroom. Here's where you look in a kitchen, and you look for one of these 5 things. And if there's a problem there, then you check it off, and that's a problem, right? It's exactly how I would go through a house. And this is exactly where I would figure out where I want to test for problems. She did that. She thought this house was good. She's like, I really think this house is good. I've learned so much from you in the last 2 houses that we've done. I'm really excited. And then I sent her all this. She gets back to me. She's like, this house is a disaster. She's like, I had to pull out of the deal. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And so she ended up using the same thing. I didn't even do it for more houses, right? So, because there's only so many types of rooms in a house too. It's so crazy when you think about it. I narrowed it down for her afterwards, and I kind of figured it out. There's only 9 types of rooms in any house. Only 9 types. They all fall into one of 9 categories. And there's only 5 types of water damage that exists. So if I could tell you to go into a room, and I could tell you where to look for, and then I could tell you what to look for, which is the 5 signs of water damage. Like, that's what the whole program is. It's basically me taking my sort of process as I go in through a room and everywhere that I look, and sticking it down in a program and having people be able to go through their own homes and do it the same way.
That's crazy. So that's great. And you have it directed towards doctors and also just regular people.
It's really a consumer. It's meant to empower someone to go through their own house, because most local inspectors don't know what they're doing. And to fly me out, it's not cheap, right? And so there has to be an answer for someone other than one of those 2 things.
Right.
So this is really just meant to empower people to be able to inspect their own homes.
But we inspect your other company. Do you have people on the ground, or is it literally just working with you? And
we have people that we fly to wherever you are that I've trained. And then either myself or Corey, who's my business partner, typically me on like 90% of the projects, I literally oversee the project from our office. So we have our inspector that flies to someone's home. They're actually on the ground looking for stuff. It's so important to actually be there to see what's going on. And then I'm overseeing it and kind of guiding the inspection from home base. And you're kind of getting 2 sets of eyes on everything, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. In your bio, you talk about mold and you talk about mycotoxins. So what's the difference between mycotoxins and mold?
Yeah. So mold is a living organism. Mycotoxins are literally just a chemical. That's the basic difference. So what happens is, if mold is growing somewhere and it has the ability to produce a mycotoxin, not all molds even have the ability to produce a toxin. Some of them don't. They just can't. Other ones can. But just because they can doesn't mean they will. So it's a defense mechanism. Think of it this way. You're in your house. You may own a gun. You're not just going to shoot it for no reason. But if somebody busts in your house, you may shoot the gun to defend yourself, right? Same thing. Certain mold types are equipped with a gun, basically. And what happens is that other molds or bacteria or other things start to kind of try to get into its territory, grow into its food source, take over its land. It creates this chemical toxin. The thing about how it works, though, it's not like it sprays it out. It covers the colony like lava over a volcano. Covers the whole thing, creates like a toxic sort of moat around the colony. And then as other molds start coming in that direction, it kills them. So the thing is, because it's a chemical byproduct and it's not a living thing, you don't necessarily like treat it the same way when you're trying to get it out of a home. And so that was the big thing that took us a long time to learn and figure out. It took us 2 years. and about $3 million of all of our clients' remediation budgets put together for us to finally realize how to best get mycotoxins out of a home, and is to treat it as if there was a series of mini chemical spills in your house and not just as if there's particles floating around. And once we kind of did that, all of a sudden it started working. So our protocol started working pretty well.
Oh, interesting. Because I think it's really important to note for people who are listening, like if you do have mold issues and you do hire like a local company, or if you find the mold, don't just hire a regular contractor to rip this stuff out.
Oh, no. I mean, we're literally dealing with biotoxins and like people need to wear full coverall suits and respirators and stuff. This isn't, I know a lot of people want to try to like do it themselves or hire a contractor because it's cheaper. Think of it like asbestos, right? Like you would never do that for asbestos because it's more known now. It's more known that asbestos gives you, mesothelioma and cancer and this and that, and you can't touch it. Like there are state and federal guidelines on how to remove asbestos from a house. It's been a bigger issue for a longer period of time. So there's just been more things that have been put in place to kind of protect us from ourselves, basically, of trying to do things on our own. Mold is still in its infancy. While we have research and everything that shows that it is a biotoxin, it connects to all kinds of health conditions, all of these things, we're still so early in the adoption phase that there is no governmental mass acceptance of this. There's no regulation. There's no anything. And so we have to protect ourselves. Like we could wait 30 years until the government finally decides to put something in place. I mean, some of us are going to be super old at that point. Some of us might be dead at that point. Like, I don't want to wait that long. Like we know all this stuff right now. So we need to protect ourselves and not rely on someone else to do it for us.
Right. And then do you feel like if someone does have mold, I know this is kind of medical advice because you said that you work with people who are hypersensitive. Is there anything that you ever recommend for them to do, or you kind of leave that to the medical doctors?
Definitely leave it to the medical guys and gals. I do things on my own, right? I have a mycotoxin issue myself from being in all these houses that I go into. So, and in turn, I have
there's no over the counter kind of like colloidal silver or anything like that you take.
I mean, not that I take carboxy, which is a binder from Cellcore.
So any kind of binders helps kind of remove the mycotoxins.
They can, but different binders work in different ways.
Right. Okay.
And sometimes your body's not actually like letting stuff out. It's holding onto it so much. So sometimes before the binders, you actually have to open your detox pathways and your drainage pathways.
That's true. So
there's
so
not like one thing to do. Yeah. It's very specific. That's why getting a functional doctor that really understands how to figure out like your terrain, your body's terrain and what's going on is so important.
Right. And have you worked with a lot of Lyme patients?
So many. It was actually the first condition that I really realized the connection to mold. Now there's so many, but I mean, years and years ago, I always just thought it was Lyme. I didn't even think it was all these other things. And then all these other things started adding on. Now autoimmune conditions and different viral infections and all these other things are all connected too. I always just thought it was a mold Lyme thing when I first started. So I worked with so many people that Lyme.
Yeah, I think any kind of long haulers that people exist, either if it's from COVID or if it's from wherever, I think anybody who's dealing with a long-term issue and they can't get better, I think they just have to look into the mold.
It's just such a big piece of your body's immune system. I mean, when you think about it, like if your body's constantly fighting this external force and trying to get rid of it and handle it, then it can't fight all the other things that are going on. And if you have this external exposure that just keeps coming and coming and coming, there's no overcoming it, which means that you'll get flare-ups of different symptoms from different things. And so if you could get rid of that component that's filling your toxic bucket or your funnel and all these different analogies people have for someone's toxic load, and you can get rid of that piece of it, now you're giving your body a chance to breathe and start working on the other thing it needs to get, to handle. So.
Right.
Yeah.
This has been amazing. Brian, is there anything that I have not covered that you think I should be covering?
I don't know. Or kind of like basic inspection. Listen, the biggest thing that I would say to take out of all of this is your house will never remediate properly if you don't find the sources of where the mold actually is. If you do air samples throughout your house, if you do dust collection and you just do them in the middle of everywhere and you don't figure out where it is, it will never, ever work. Don't waste your money on remediation that way. It'll literally be like setting it on fire. So it's very important to find where the sources are. That's the first step.
I do have one last question. If you do find the sources, is there any kind of system that you would recommend to put, like a house system, like for the air filter to put on your HVAC or anything like that? Is that worth doing that, or is that not worth?
I think it's worth doing. It doesn't fix sources, but it
Right.
helps protect your air conditioning system. So I think that that's really important. There's the IntelliPure Whole Home Cleaner is one that I really like. There's also one from IQ Air called the Perfect 16. That's a good one as well. Those are two options that you can use to help protect your air conditioning system. But it doesn't, it doesn't fix the source of the problem, right? So the biggest thing always comes back to source. Why is this happening? Where is it coming from? Let's fix that first.
Right. So you fix the source and then hopefully clean the air after that, so it stops.
Well, so the remediation is really in two phases. First phase is remove the source, clean where it's coming from, get rid of the factory. The second phase of remediation is then, if you think of this factory again, say all the smoke that came out of the factory over the last 10 years, you bulldoze the factory down. Cool. The smoke didn't like magically suck back into the factory when you did it, right? It's like out. It's in the air now. It is what it is. We now have to clean that up. Right. So in the house, you have two phases. First phase is remove the sources, a wall, a ceiling, a cabinet, whatever. The second phase, we have to clean the house in a specific way. We have to make sure the heating air conditioning system is not impacted, because otherwise it'll just keep recirculating. And again, you'll think that remediation doesn't work. It's not that it doesn't work. It's just that you didn't actually do a full remediation. And so that's why there's still things left over.
That's great. This has been awesome. I so much appreciate your time. It's very useful information. And anybody who has not looked into this whole mold journey, it's definitely worth it if you're not getting better.
Yay.
So
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.